Hey, what's up everyone? This is another episode of Grow Food Essay. This is Brian Gordon. This is my backyard plot here. So today we're going to be talking about sheet mulching and basically be able to do a soil profile of what sheet mulching over a long period of time has kind of done. So this area back here behind me, I started about 5 years ago, and it really was only about into 2 years after that I started planting in it. The first part of it, I really kind of didn't know really what I was going to do. I just knew that this was the sunnier spot of the yard and that this would work best kind of for growing. And so what I ended up just doing is planning, is just making sure that I could either start the process now that I had that kind of thought that I was going to eventually be gardening in this area, and start that process now by sheet mulching. So I just started in the area, and then slowly, as I started kind of figuring out the shape of it and a lot more where the pathways were kind of formed, and really build it up in that kind of way, I started laying out a plan on a piece of paper, and I drew several designs after I kind of mapped out the space. But really this whole process during all of that, it's just been sheet mulching, and just really it's about layering organic matter like mulch, carbon material like that, or even things like compost, manures, like fresh compost, greens, nitrogen-based materials. So going back and forth between just layering all those over the existing soil that I had. So now we're about at that 5-year mark, and we're going to go ahead and take a look at a soil profile and see really what that's become over this time. And it'll really kind of help show, that this is really a good way to kind of be starting. It was all materials that were available for free, bags of leaves, mulch that came from the city, and many like cardboard and many resources that I was able to kind of scavenger around and just build this up. So I hope it's something that you try. Let's take a look at an example of it. So already digging around in this hole here, we've already kind of found a little baby worm. This brings in some of the stage of decomposers that can also do some of the work. So I don't really like farm worms as much, but I'll often try to figure out ways to get them to come to the garden, and really the easiest way to kind of do that is to be adding organic matter, composting, sometimes in the garden bed area or pathways. But so we got down in here and it feels pretty good. It's looking pretty good. We're going to be planting a tree there, but we can see right here. So here's a little bit of the profile. So here's my current layer of sheet mulch that's on here. That's a layer of cardboard with leaves and just mulch. So it wasn't a thick layer I was able to do, but I was just trying to get rid of some of the weeds that have grown in over the previous growing season. And you can't really tell as much, but maybe right about here is actually all new soil. So it's kind of got a lighter brown color, and as you can kind of tell, it's got some clay in it. It sticks together a little bit, but really it breaks apart really easily. So that's kind of a good way to tell. It's got mixtures of kind of like sand particles in it that help with drainage. We get down a little bit lower into the clay layer, and we still see some pieces. This looks like old cardboard that was in here that was kind of decomposing. We get down a little bit further, and this clay is a lot different from some of the other clay in my yard. This clay is a little bit more brittle. It's slowly, as sort of the remnants and the excretions of the decomposition process are just seeping out through the rain and just going through and starting to break up this clay underneath. So one thing I could have done was to kind of do an initial till or initial plow in the area before I started my sheet mulching. That would really have gotten me down a couple of inches into the clay layer mixed with organic matter, and then started sheet mulching on the way on up. But instead, you can still kind of see that some of the ways that this decomposition process happens over this land, and the root systems and things that were left in the ground that die in here become organic matter like this. you know, is going to become organic matter deep down into the clay soil layer. So this will help break up all that clay and make it malleable for a lot of those root systems to go through. You can still see some active root systems that are able to move through this clay pretty well. So that's really what we want. Is the clay is not necessarily a bad thing. We can work with that material, and that's a really strong kind of soil substance that's in our area. So there's ways to kind of manipulate that clay, or to kind of remediate that clay into where it can become workable and usable in the garden space. So digging around in this hole too, we've also found one of the larger kind of second stage decomposers is the ox beetle larva. So this is the larva stage. It spends most of its time in the ground doing its work, but these guys can burrow pretty deep, and let me see if I can clean them off here. He's got these pretty strong little mandibles on here that can break down really thick material, root systems, leaves, mulch, things like that. So that's always a good sign of soil health to have them around. This is what their product yields, you know, and this is their poop. But if we break it up, it's just usable soil at this stage. So really good to have these guys around, and that's all part of just bringing in organic matter. So we didn't introduce these to the area. A lot of worms and other decomposers are already in the area, but the minute that you start introducing food sources and organic matter for them, that really makes a habitat that is welcoming to them, and they'll continue to go out. You can even see that little worm right there. So there's a lot of activity going on in here. So again, we're talking about creating a living soil, because over the years, these guys are going to be doing a lot of the help and the work that you need around the garden. So stabilizing and creating all these structures out here that are kind of working non-stop really kind of helps. So here's what that ox beetle looks like in its adult form. Its little carcasses will get left behind after it breeds and dies. But I also wanted to show y'all, this is kind of what the front space looks like. So, you know, the backyard is a lot more for annuals, and so there's a lot more of a turnover and a lot more sheep mulching that goes on here. But you can already kind of tell and see some of the productivity of just kind of sheep mulching over, maybe this one's been about 3 years, and then I started putting in a lot of perennials. And so you can already kind of see what that has done to the area. And the main concepts that we're kind of pulling out of here is that you want to create a living soil. You want to, in order to do that, you want to incorporate all of the microbes and fungi and bacteria that are going to come in, and bugs and things like that that are going to come in and start breaking down material. And the way to do that is kind of be feeding them with organic matter and laying all that out. So this is a no-till method. Whenever we till, that often can disrupt those layers and expose a lot of those things to sunlight, a lot of those organisms, and they don't really thrive in the sunlight that well. They like shade and moisture, and so this really kind of helps build that process up. So by not tilling, we're able to kind of achieve more of a living soil with the organisms that were already existing in the soil prior to building the garden here, and just a regular kind of lawn, green lawn space. The other thing to kind of keep in mind though about tilling is maybe you could till the first time, as we talked about earlier, you could till the garden to incorporate organic material down into that clay layer a lot deeper in the initial stage, and you'll have sort of a loss or an impact to the living organisms that are there at that time, but they will recover. And as long as you try to minimize your amount of times that you're actually tilling and turning soil over and shifting all those layers around, the more of a chance that those organisms can thrive and start to increase in numbers and really start breaking down material at such a high rate that you can build soil really quickly. So I hope this has inspired you enough. Always do some more research, you know. There's a lot of stuff online, and this is a great kind of way that I found for really, really affordable ways of scavenging resources to kind of build the garden that I really wanted to see.